Hi, everybody. Welcome to the MMOA podcast. I'm going to be your host today, Ellen Seppi. Welcome to the MMOA podcast brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. I'm going to be your host, and this is Renee, my friend and coworker, who's also a physical therapist. And we're going to be talking tonight about the Netflix series called Live to 100, Lessons from the Blue Zones. It's new on Netflix. We're so excited about it as a faculty and as a team and as a profession because it highlights so many important things that we emphasize to our patients and some we might not, and some things that we might occasionally miss. We're really excited to talk about this. Renee and I have both been talking about talking about this in the clinic nonstop, and so I wanted her here tonight so we could kind of talk about what our favorite aspects of the show were. And tonight we're going to be talking about movement. The themes in the show were kind of classified around these different geographical regions where people are living to exceptionally long lifespans, and they were all kind of classified into how they were doing it and including movement. And that's going to be our topic of tonight. So I felt kind of called out in the first episode on Okinawa about how Americans in the show, the host said Americans are so focused on protein and weightlifting and it's not working for us. Did you feel called out in this?
I did a little bit because I feel like we try to emphasize to our patients that consuming adequate protein or going to the gym or even trying to highlight specific reps or sets to optimize performance, but really they're gardening and they are thriving.
And so that kind of made me shift my mindset a little bit into how I see natural movement and how important it is to maintain a lifestyle, because part of the show emphasized that, you know, things we used to have to do like gardening and walking to get our groceries and hiking uphill, we don't have to do those things anymore, and we all have cars, and it's just really negatively impacting our lifespan.
Our lives have become so mechanicalized. Essentially, we have a tool for everything, or even like we go to the grocery store to buy our bread. These people who are living to be 100 are making their bread by hand, making their pasta by hand. Like, they're literally doing everything by hand, therefore getting more physical activity than Americans who traditionally go to the grocery store and just pick up their food that's processed.
Right. And it kind of made me rethink a little bit about, so 4 out of the 5 blue zones were outside of the United States, but there was one blue zone in Loma Linda, California, where people were living an extraordinarily long lifespan, and they kind of highlighted, you know, how can in modern society we achieve this longer lifespan even with a lot of those time-saving and energy-saving devices. And I kind of thought that there was hope for that. So I'll still encourage patients to do strength training because there's irrefutable evidence that it's important for us to do strength training throughout our lifespan to maintain longevity. But I might celebrate what my patients are doing outside of the gym.
Or even just breaking up their sedentary activity throughout the day.
Right.
Whether that's like movement snacks or just trying to get them more consistent. Like, I feel like I have so many patients who they can't even tolerate 3 minutes of continuous activity. And so just breaking up that sedentary time, I think is such a valuable lesson for them.
Right. And I think a lot of our culture too, the way that my attitude has changed, like, I hate gardening. Zero hope to be a green thumb over here. And it's shocking to me how important daily exercise is for longevity, and walking and doing daily tasks around the house. But in gardening, people in Okinawa that were living these extraordinarily long lives, they were all gardening all the time. So now if a patient tells me that they love gardening, I might used to think, well, that's not really exercise. That's not really hitting the nail on the head or checking that box. Now I might celebrate it a little bit more, even though it's not something I do or will likely ever do.
It takes a lot of squat mobility
It does.
to be able to get down on that floor.
You sound like a gardener. Are you a gardener?
No, I do not like
Okay.
gardening. My husband does that.
So, what are some things that you've heard your patients say that you used to think is like, okay, that's not really exercise, and because of that show on Netflix, you're starting to appreciate it a bit more?
Walking, when they like say they would walk for exercise. And I would always think like, all right, you walk to get places, you walk to live, but you don't necessarily walk for exercise.
Yeah.
Whereas these people who are walking up inclines to go see their friends,
Yeah.
that's a lot of work.
So that was in Italy. I think it was in Sardinia, Italy.
Yes,
Was it at Sardinia?
I believe so.
Okay, so Sardinia, Italy, there's a study that looked at lifespan, highlighted in the show, lifespan and the pitch of the neighborhood and the slope of the neighborhood in which you live, and longevity and basically the incline that you have to walk in were very much related.
Yeah, so if you lived at a higher incline and you had more incline in your
Day-to-day
streets,
life.
you were likely to live longer, which
Yeah.
kind of makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. And I think researchers were like, okay, maybe it's the elevation that's helping them to live longer lives. But it wasn't the elevation, it was how much of an incline there was to get around in the neighborhoods that you lived in. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah.
And you and I live in pretty hilly. We live in Littleton, Colorado, so coming to you live. And I think we've got enough hills. This could be worth it for us.
I know. We gotta take people outside and go walk up and down those
Yeah.
hills.
We got some good hills. We got some good hills going on outside of the clinic. So I guess another one too is just how important it was to do exercise with people that made you more social.
Like Loma Linda, who did
Yeah.
pickleball for 3 hours. Very
Yes.
social sport.
Yes. And so I used to think of like, okay, let's just broach the subject here. Every time somebody tells me that they do pickleball, I'm like, all right. Like, that's not really exercise either. I used to put it in kind of the same category as gardening. I love tennis. And I know most serious tennis players would say that pickleball isn't really the same thing. But it was amazing to see these people enjoying a sport, being social, and getting exercise, working on reactive stepping, getting their heart rates up, and doing it for hours because they were having so much fun. Have you ever played pickleball?
I played pickleball in high school and I have
What?
not played it since. We played it in PE, rural Montana. Other than that, that's it.
This is a totally spontaneous question. I did not know this. That's pretty cool.
So it was really fun.
Would you say that pickleball is like strenuous exercise, or would you say that it's pretty
I feel like you can make it as hard as you want it to be.
okay?
Like both of my in-laws, they're retired and they play pickleball like 3 times a week. Like they love it. And I feel like you can play it as intensely as you want to, or maybe a little bit more leisurely.
Yeah.
And so, which I kind of like that because you can scale it to all abilities.
So I might be pro pickleball after watching this show. Pro gardening, pro pickleball, pro walking, hills, walking up hills. I just feel like this show really emphasized how important regular movement was. And for those of us who are living in more industrialized cities that have cars, that's kind of a hard thing to do. The last episode of this series on Netflix, the Live to 100, I thought was really interesting because it talked about an American city where some of these ideas were successful, and then it also talked about in Singapore how these concepts are kind of built into the culture.
They literally have built gyms or outdoor gym equipment on every single corner.
Yeah.
And to make it so accessible for people.
Yeah, I thought that was really inspiring to watch people kind of have to walk to access public transportation. In Singapore, what's really cool is that very few people had cars. And I know I love driving. I love my car. But I'm starting to think about, okay, how could I get around without a car? And if I had to get around, how would that benefit my life? And so in Singapore, people have to walk, usually through parks, to get to bus stations to take them all around the city. And if you're thinking, okay, Ellen, this is where this conversation ends. I'm not walking places. I love my car. I love driving. I'm not taking buses places. They talked about having social walking groups in a city in Minnesota that adopted some of the policies and changed their public policy to inspire people to adhere to the principles that made these blue zones successful. And one of those was that they signed up for walking groups. And I love walking my dogs with my husband. I think that that's such an important part of my day. And for us to be able to connect and to walk my dog. But I'm going to be honest, if I didn't have a dog, I don't think I would do that.
No, or I've had a lot of patients where even when they retire and they lose their dog, they're like, oh, I'm not ready for another dog, or a puppy's a lot of work. And then they don't walk for enjoyment anymore.
Right. So maybe thinking outside the box of encouraging walking groups. I know that there are a lot of walking groups on Facebook, inspiring walking groups in gym settings, or getting a dog. I've told my patients before that I think getting a dog would really improve their lives. And we have a mutual patient who's just
actually got a puppy.
She got a puppy recently, and she is walking so much more. She's walking infinitely more now because of the dog.
And you're happier if you get a dog.
I'm happier with a dog. And
yeah.
You have 2 dogs, so you're double as happy as me. But I feel like this show really highlighted a lot of different ways that movement can be accessible. It can be modified around, modern conveniences. You can still get exercise without having to go to a gym. You can still get exercise if you have a car. And just highlighted a lot of really useful things that I could encourage my patients to try to inspire them to move more regularly.
Absolutely. And just finding something that they enjoy, whether that is gardening, is walking, is pickleball, is going for a hike even. Just finding what they enjoy and picking it and running with it.
Yeah, I've heard you say that a lot in the clinic. You've asked your patients a lot, what do you enjoy? What would you enjoy to do? And I admire you for that. And that's part of the reason I wanted to pick your brain on this topic tonight, because I knew that you really emphasized successfully what your patients could be doing. I know that you've had a few patients that love dancing. Yeah, love dancing. We've had a few patients come into the clinic
that's physical activity, and that is exercise as well too.
Yeah, I'm not a big dancer, but hey, if you love dancing, go do it.
You can learn how to waltz with your spouse again.
Yeah, so I just feel like there's just endless inspiration. Do you feel like this movement episode or theme, watching that show and thinking a bit more about moving naturally throughout your day, do you feel like that's inspired or changed how you move around? I know you and I both exercise quite a bit, so this probably didn't put a big dent into what we would do, but do you feel like it changed how you operate, or not too much?
It made me more inclined to walk to work, or even just walking maybe to the grocery store or to a coffee shop instead of driving, because if something's 5 minutes away, we often think, all right, that's 5 minutes. I can drive there. It'll be super quick if I drive there, where a 5-minute drive is like a 15 to 20-minute walk. That is not unreasonable to do, and we can save a little bit of gas money and the polar bears a little bit.
I know you love polar bears. Yeah, so Renee and I both live within 4 or 5 miles of the clinic where we work together, and I feel like we're in the pre-contemplation stage on how alternative ways that we could get to work other than cars. But I've biked here once.
Biking, scootering.
I love scootering to work. Yeah, I used to bike to work all the time when I lived 1 mile here. I gotta get you my bike.
Yeah, we got a bike.
Yeah, we got a bike. So anyways, Thank you so much for joining us here tonight, guys. I hope that you can take some lessons away from this Blue Zone experience on Netflix, and we appreciate you being here with us this evening to think about movement and how it can be natural for our patients. Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful evening.